In 7th grade math, we have been looking at multi-step equations. This really ties to our Math and Focus lesson 4.2, where we might run into simplifying on both sides of an equation. And in this case, we'll run into some distribution and some like terms on either side of the equation, as well as variables on both sides. So for this lesson, I'm just giving you some sample problems that came from a riddle that we sent home, and something that I'd like you to be able to tackle when you see our unit test. And in the future here, when we move into inequalities, you'll have to apply the same great steps. So if you look here, I took a quick minute and I wrote out for you the steps that I think we should focus in on for these multi-step equations. So in order, if you look, number one, I'm going to look to distribute anything on the left. If there's distribution on the left, I'll take care of it first. Next, I'll check distribution on the right. When I'm done distributing and eliminating all of those parentheses or those grouping symbols, I'm going to look to combine like terms on the left. And when I'm done combining any like terms or simplifying, we might call that on the left, I will simplify anything I can with like terms on the right. And the last thing that we move into is inverse operations. Whenever you cross the equal sign, this is really critical. I tell my students it's kind of like shouting cowabunga when you jump the moat. Instead, you should probably shout inverse operations, or maybe SADMEP, which is kind of like PEMDAS backwards. So I need you to know that it's a really important step, and it involves using the opposite operations or inverse operations. Let's take our first example here, letter E, and I'm just going to copy down exactly what we were given. 4 times the quantity of 5n minus 7 equals 10n plus 2. If I follow my steps from up above, my multi-step equations involving distribution, I check on the left first. So I do see a distribution here. I notice that this 4 is really being distributed across the quantity of 5n take away 7. Notice I am going to change my subtraction to adding the opposite. I think changing the minus to a plus, changing the sign of next is a good idea to avoid dropping any signs along the way. So if I had 4 groups of 5n, I would get 20 n's. And if I had 4 groups of negative 7, I would get negative 28. Notice there was addition happening, there still is addition happening, and on the other side, I'm not doing anything but a rewrite step at this point. Well, if you go back to the top, we simplified with distribution on the left. Let's check for distribution on the right. Is there any? No, there are no parentheses or grouping symbols, so we're going to move on to step number 3. Let's combine like terms on the left. So can I put together my variable term of n's with constants? The answer would be no. So move on to step 4. Can we combine anything with like terms on the right? Well, again, we have constants and variable terms that do not go together. They are not like terms. So I guess we fast forward to step number 5. I'm going to use inverse operations to cross the equal sign. I need to gather my terms. So in this case, I'm going to gather my variables to the left. I need to get rid of this 10n on the right. And to do that, I have to use opposites or inverse operations. Instead of having a positive 10n, I'm going to combine it with a negative 10n. I'm going to do the opposite. Or adding 10n is the opposite of subtracting 10n, so I use subtraction. If you take a look at this next step, we'll simplify a little bit here. I had 20 n's and I took away 10 from you. You're left with 10 n's, and notice it's positive. There were more positives than negatives. I still have this addition of a negative 28, and on the other side, this simplifies down to just 2. I'm almost there. If you notice, I'm in really good shape because all of my variables, my kings, are gathered on the left. But I need to move these constants to the other side of the drawbridge or the equal sign. Whenever you cross the drawbridge or the equal sign, you have to use inverse ops. So what's the opposite of a negative 28? Hopefully you're thinking a positive 28. And if you do that to the left, you do that to the right. I don't love my lineup over here on the right-hand side, but I think we get the idea. 28 plus 2 more we know is 30. On the other side, I notice that these negative and positive 28s cancel out, and I'm left with 10n equals 30. We're down to a one-step equation, and the only way to get the king alone is to undo the multiplication that's sitting next to him. So we're going to divide. If I divide by 10 on the left, you divide by 10 on the right. Looks like I'm going to get a final answer here of n equals 3. If this was my worksheet, I would transfer my answer over. I would write n equals 3 next to letter E, And down at the bottom, of course, I'd find 3 as an answer and put an E in there for the riddle. Let's try another couple here just to make sure that we're heading in the right direction with multi-step equations. So I still have my rules up top, and I kind of cleared away my check marks so we can get a fresh start. Let's see if we can find something with a distribution in a different location. Something a little more challenging, maybe. Ooh, I like this next one. This next letter E looks a little bit different because I see distribution on the opposite side. That could be exciting. So let's try 2v plus 18 equals 16 minus 4 times the quantity of v plus 7. The first thing you want to think about is distribution on the left. So do I have any distribution on the left? The answer is no. So check. See if we can find any distribution on the right. So step 2, check for distribution on the right, and good, here we have some. I can get rid of these parentheses with some distribution, or sometimes we call that expansion. But be careful, what's being distributed? It's not just a 4. If you notice, you might want to change a minus 2 plus, change the sign of next, and distribute a negative 4 across that grouping symbol. So what is negative 4 times v? Negative 4v. And what is negative 4 times 7? Negative 28. There was addition happening between those two terms. There still is addition, but the parentheses are gone. We've distributed or expanded. I still have 16 being added to those terms, and on the other side of the equal sign, I still have 2v plus 18. Great, we took care of distribution on the right. What does it tell me to check for next? Can we combine like terms on the left? Well, no, variable terms don't go with constants, so no need to look any farther. What about this? Can I combine like terms on the right? Is there anything on the right side that could be combined? Take a look here. I have constants plus a variable term plus constants. Oh, these constants go together. I could combine a positive 16 and a negative 28. And what would you get here? I think a negative 12. Different signs subtract. 28 take away 16 is 12. And it's going to be negative. More negatives result in a more negative answer. So again, simplifying, I'm just combining the like terms on the right, and everything on the left stayed the same. There was nothing I could do there to simplify. Great. Check off number 4. We are ready to use inverse operations because we are crossing the drawbridge, my friends. We're crossing the equal sign. So to do that, I want to gather my kings or my variables to one side and my constants to the other. Well, I typically grab my kings and move them across to the left. That's always my preferred way because I like to answer with the variable equals in a final answer. So for that reason, the opposite of a negative 4v is a positive 4v. The only way to get rid of him is to do the opposite. And if I do that to the right side of my equation, I do that to the left. Notice now I'm showing my inverse operations. I'm showing you 2 different sides of the equation. Well, on the left, I'm going to get 6v's plus 18. And don't forget your drawbridge or your equal sign. And on the other side, we're really left with just a negative 12. We are almost there, but there are constants on both sides of the equal sign. We need to fix this. There should not be constants on both sides, but just on one. So I need to move this 18. It's being added, so I could use the opposite or the inverse, and I could subtract. Notice I'm showing it twice. I also notice I'm going to have some trouble here because I'm running out of room. All right, well, let's see what happens. On the left side, I have 6v equals a negative 30. This is really messy here, and I apologize. I'm probably going to have to do a rewrite step here somewhere. Maybe I can erase at this point. So I'm going to erase. I'm going to try to slide this up, and I hope, again, you're working on line paper so this doesn't happen to you. Or maybe you're writing a little more concisely. That would be a good idea, too. 6v equals negative 30. That's where we left off. Let's try this. So this is still letter E continued. 6v equals negative 30. We've reduced this to a one-step equation. I am trying to isolate my variable, get the king alone, and the only way to undo this secret multiplication in algebra land is to divide. So I'm going to divide by 6 on the left and 6 on the right. Well, if you notice, my 6's will cancel out. I'll be left with one fabulous king. I could just write v. And on the other side, 30 divided by 6 is 5. But that's a negative divided by a positive. I should get a negative 5. This is a final answer. So down here for our second letter E, I'm going to write v equals negative 5. And you want to check down at the bottom if you're working on this worksheet right now. Make sure that in your riddle you can find an answer of -5 and put the letter E next to it. There's one more exciting one coming up that I want us to tune into because I saw students kind of struggle on this in class. So letter I. I hope you're looking ahead and noticing something interesting happening here. I'm going to try to write a little bit smaller for us this time so that I have enough room to show all of my steps. All right. Well, if I return to my multi-step equation list of things to do, it says check the left for distribution. And there is distribution here, but it's kind of hidden. You might want to change a minus to a plus and change the sign of next. And when you do that, you might notice out front we end up doing the same thing. We might, in fact, want to show a -1 as an implied coefficient sitting here. That -1 needs to be distributed across the quantity or the grouping symbol. So what would happen here? I would still have 4 x's, but -1 times 9 would get me -9. And -1 times a -3x would turn that into a positive 3x. Negatives times negatives are positives. But you can have whatever you want. On the other side, I still have 8x, take away 1. Excellent. I got rid of my distribution on the left. Is there any distribution on the right? Well, let's check. Nope, no parentheses over there. Skip step 2. How about step 3? Can I combine like terms on the left? Okay, so I always look left before I look right. I notice that I can put together some variable terms. 4 x's can go with 3 x's to get me 7x. And I'd still have plus a -9 happening. And on the other side, 8x take away 1. Good. We combined like terms. We simplified the left. Now, remember to check the right. Can you combine like terms over here? I have variable terms and constants, but those don't go together, do they? They're unlike terms. So, skip step 4. We are ready to shout the cowabunga, or at least to shout inverse operations as we cross the moat, or the drawbridge, or the equal sign. So look at step number 5 here. This is pretty critical. This is where we apply our inverse operations to cross the equal sign. Whenever I cross the equal sign, we have to do the opposite. We can't just combine things the way we see them. We have to undo them with inverse ops. So again, remember, I always like to take my variables and move them to the left. So how am I going to move this 8x across? I would combine it with a -8x. If I do that to the left, I do that to the right. And let's see what happens here. Well, on the left side, try a different color for you. I have 7 x's and I took away 8 of them from you. You're going to be looking at a -1x. You still have plus a -9, and we still have drawbridge or equal sign, of course. And on the other side, these 8 x's will cancel out, and I'll be left with a -1, or maybe plus a -1. Still a -1. This is fabulous. I have all of my kings combined. They all join forces on the left. So that means all my constants need to move to the right. The only way to move this -9 over is to add +9. And if I do that to the left, I do that to the right. Let's see what happens here. I'm left with a -1x equals +8. And this would be a great answer if that king looked a little more positive. But I hope you realize we don't leave our variable terms looking negative. So one way to undo that is to divide by a -1 on both sides. Final answer, x equals a -8. If you take a look, you want to copy or transfer over your answer here next to letter I. X equals -8. If you go and look for this in your riddle, you'll be able to put the letter I next to it. So just a quick refresher, when we are simplifying multi-step equations, we first really exercise the rules of PEMDAS. We use PEMDAS on the left, we use PEMDAS on the right. We're simplifying. When you're done, you need to switch gears, and that's when you move into inverse operations. Whenever you cross the drawbridge, I can't get my pen to write here for you, but whenever you cross the drawbridge, you have to use an inverse operation to get there. So this is again where we kind of apply the idea of SADMAP. We move backwards at that point.